Hello and welcome to this contingency recording for Year 2 Online Seminar 3. The focus of this seminar is Leading with Agency in English, and this will be your final subject seminar of the training programme. It's important to note that when you are engaging with this contingency recording, you should also be using a PDF copy of the slide deck, which you can find in the Brightspace notes. This slide deck has hyperlinks that are going to be helpful for you with supplementary reading and also to select a couple of CPD sessions that are in the form of YouTube recordings a little bit later on, in lieu of the live sessions that will be taking place on the live version of this seminar. Please take a moment to find these resources now, and if you have any problems accessing, please get in touch with your SDL as soon as possible. Okay, let's get started. One of the things we'll be doing in the live seminar to welcome everyone is to take a moment of appreciation and reflection for the learning that has taken place in the 2 years on the training programme. Although you're not engaging in the live version of this seminar, it's important that you have a go at this too. So wherever you're taking your notes for today's recording, please take some time to think about those 2 questions on the slide. What have you enjoyed most about your second year on the programme? And what do you now know that you didn't know this time last year? Where possible, try and make this subject specific, as this is your final subject seminar. Take a moment to capture those ideas somewhere safe now, as you'll return to some similar ideas at the end of this session. So, in terms of the objectives for today's seminar, we are going to consider our role as change agents in English and the opportunities to enact this in our individual school contexts. We'll then use our professional agency to delve into subject-specific CPD webinars. There are some recordings that will be available to you on the slide deck in the Brightspace content that I mentioned earlier that you will be able to choose from. You will also reflect on what effective leadership means and what this looks like for English teachers, and take a moment to celebrate your achievements and make some pledges to the subject and teaching community that we have in English. So let's start with the first part of this online seminar, which is on agency and change. And we'll consider our role as change agents in English and the opportunities to enact this in your school context. In understanding our role as change agents, it's useful to think about the Teach First vision that we all endorsed when we started this programme as a trainee, or indeed for us as SDLs. So let's remind ourselves of why, our vision for the classroom, and why it is that we started with Teach First in the first place. So we know that the ultimate aim of Teach First is to acknowledge that no child's educational success is limited by their background. I'll give you a moment to have a read of the statistics on the left-hand side in those bullet points. So take a moment to just have a look at those now. Now that you've read these bullet points and some of the key statistics that motivate our work here at Teach First, I want you to think about a couple of questions. How does this resonate with you? Have you witnessed the deprivation in your area for your particular context? Have you seen any examples of inequality? And what impact has this had on the communities and the young people that you serve? You don't necessarily have to take notes for this section, but do take a moment to have a think about that now. In order to understand our idea of change agents and what this means, we want to think about the notion of teacher agency. And one of the things that we've tried to instill in all of you from a subject perspective is the sense of agency you have over your subject-specific development. If you're unfamiliar with this term, teacher agency is essentially the ability to purposefully enhance your teaching practice, to address classroom challenges, and to guide your own professional development. Now, the level of teacher agency that you each feel you have in your school context will very likely differ, and some of you may feel that you have more agency than others. Yet the beauty of being on this programme and experiencing our English curriculum is the agency that we have shared with you to try and shape you, not as these passive recipients of theory, but as active agents of research who can actually analyse and apply evidence to your specific contexts. This means, first and foremost, you have been empowered as teachers to critically engage with research. This means you've had opportunities to develop research literacy skills, participate in collaborative inquiry practices, and engage in meaningful dialogue about the strengths and limitations of different research methodologies and approaches. Not only have you had the chance to do that in your assignment work, but also in the training days and seminars that we've hosted, where we've been exploring different types of theory into practice. This leads really nicely into the second part, having autonomy over pedagogical decision making. Whilst we know that it's really great to be evidence-informed practitioners, the evidence that goes into it should not dictate it. We have to retain expertise and professional judgment to adapt these evidence-informed strategies to our specific students and learning environments, as well as subject areas. And this is something that has come through from your interactions with your subject development leads, and also through the range of different observations and teaching episodes you've done for your training and for your PGDE assignments. And finally, the idea of engaging in a culture of open inquiry and dialogue. Through collaborative learning communities, you can share best practice, discuss research findings, and support each other's professional development. All of these are crucial for creating a culture of critical expertise. Now you'll see that all of these examples are things that you have actually been able to engage with as part of the training programme, specifically your subject studies. So whether you feel you have that level of agency in your school context, you've certainly had a range of opportunities to explore it as part of your subject training. So let's think a little bit more about what this has to do with being agents of change. You may have heard this language used previously, but the idea of teachers as agents of change underpins the principle that they are the key agents of change to transform education and to ensure quality and inclusive education for all children in their respective communities. I want you to take a moment to digest this definition and have a think about two things. Firstly, as an English teacher specifically, do you see yourself as an agent of change when you think about that definition? And secondly, on a more general or personal level, what do you think the benefits and potential limitations are of this terminology being used to describe teachers? Please pause the video and take around 2 minutes to reflect on that definition and the supporting questions now. Thank you for engaging in that reflection activity. Now, you might not feel like an agent of change. You may have some criticality of that phrase, which I understand. You may not actually feel that you personally have had the capacity as an early career teacher to actualise your dreams and intentions of addressing educational equality. You might have found that actually there's some areas that you set out to develop, but that you haven't had the time or space or perhaps agency to do so. However, it's really important to recognise here that you have actually all engaged in practices that contribute to educational equity through engaging in the year-long curriculum and your Module 4 work. When you consider how you've carried this through, you might think about how you've been an agent of change simply by accounting for and understanding these 4 strands of inclusion that were introduced to you in your Module 4 and Module 5 assignments. Take a moment to pause the video now and to remind yourself of what these strands of inclusion are. So now let's have a think about your personal progress. We've thought about what teacher agency means, we've thought about what it means to be an agent of change, and we've also linked that to the 4 threads of inclusion. This puts you in a position to be able to think about your personal progress to contributing to that Teach First vision and what you've been able to achieve. On the slide here, you can see a really key question in the middle. Where have you been able to build aspiration, change expectations, and/or open doors for young people in your subject? On the slide, you can see some examples of the 4 threads of inclusion in orange, and also the 3 aspects of teacher agency in blue. Any of these examples that you've engaged with will count as being an agent of change and contributing to educational equity. I'd like you to take a moment now, approximately 5 minutes, to pause the video and perhaps draw upon 1 or 2 of these categories on the screen. Think about your learning, your experience, and how you've addressed this particular aspect. It might be to do with your classroom practice. It might be working with colleagues across your school. It might be a particular interaction that you had with an SDL that changed your way of thinking about things. It might be your attendance at a summer session, some curriculum content that you engaged with, or even something you did as part of your assignment work. Please take 5 minutes now to note down something for at least 2 of the examples on the screen in light of what you've experienced of the curriculum this year. Here's an example of what that personal progress might look like. And if you found that previous activity a little bit abstract or couldn't really pinpoint any specific examples at this moment, this might help you to reassess what you've written so far. This particular one focuses on the pedagogical decision making that the trainee has made, and also the fact that it links to representation as one of those 4 threads of inclusion. I'll give you a moment to pause the video and have a read of this example and see if it adds anything to your own reflection that you've completed. So this is a short exercise in exploring the idea that actually teacher agency and agents of change are really integral to the experiences that you've had on this curriculum in the past 2 years. All of the decisions that you have made in your individual contexts require some degree of agency. And in English, we've used the curriculum that you have experienced to facilitate your teacher agency and to help you engage in the process of being an agent of change. So, some key messages to take away from this introductory part of the seminar. That by engaging in the curriculum, you have actively been engaging in discussions, research, and collaboration that shape your identity as agents of change. Secondly, the pedagogies and research that have been shared with you over the past few years have been designed for you to make decisions that allow you to have agency in your school contexts, selecting the research and the strategies that best support your pupils and your context. All of the work related to your Year 2 assignment and these related strands of inclusion contribute massively to the vision of addressing educational equality. And actually, our role as change agents can come from small and creative acts. We are a very large community of English teachers, and if these small changes are happening across the country, that's a huge impact that we're having on the schools that we work with. And finally, a key takeaway to note is that regardless of your context, you all possess teacher agency now, as you are able to critically engage with research and policy. You will know how to exact autonomy over pedagogical decision making, and you also know how to engage in dialogue and open inquiry. I hope this gives you some insight into this idea of agents of change as you think about what you're going to be pursuing next year. This brings us to the end of this first introductory session, and we'll move into session 2 shortly, where you'll be selecting a specific session for your own professional subject development. Thank you for engaging in session 1. Welcome back to part 2 of Year 2 Online Seminar 3. In the live version of this seminar, ECTs will have the opportunity to select from a list of different sessions that will conclude the work that we have done on your summer sessions for 2025 as your summer term interactions. So this part of the seminar today is all about using your professional agency to have that idea of choice and to delve into a subject-specific professional development webinar that suits where you're at and what you want to focus on. As you know, your Term 3 interactions have been personalised subject CPD in the form of our summer sessions programmes. You have attended 1 compulsory and perhaps a couple of further optional subject sessions to develop your choice of subject-specific expertise. And these have been led by our wonderful subject team who are brimming with different passion projects and experiences as English teachers. As we only get a finite number of opportunities to have seminars with you, it's also a really nice space for us to be able to share the wealth of expertise we have as a very large English department online. As always, our thinking for this is research informed. And according to Hargreaves et al., research suggests that effective professional development takes place when teachers use their own curiosity and creativity to develop professionally. We believe that agency and choice, as I mentioned in session 1, is a huge part of this. Considering this, we wanted to carry that sense of professional agency into this final seminar, where you will now have an opportunity to engage in a final choice of subject-specific professional development. Now, in the live session, there are a choice of 6 different sessions. These sessions are subject to change depending on staffing, but the general idea of what is covered is listed here. Now, for these seminars, these will obviously be running live, and we will provide recordings and resources for these sessions a little bit later after the seminar. In the meantime, as you are engaging in this session online, I'm going to offer you some different options. Here you'll find recordings of some of last year's 2024 summer sessions. You'll see that 4 of these replicate the sessions that are going to be taking place in the live seminar. These sessions were all recorded, as our current summer sessions have been for you, so that people can revisit and look at additional sessions to the ones that they've attended. This is where you're going to need to access the slides that have been provided in the self-study. When you go into those slides, approximately slide 14, you should be able to click on the relevant hyperlink to select one of these to view. Please pause the video now to open up the resources, to go to slide 14 in your PDF of slides, and to click on one of these recordings that you would like to watch from last year's summer sessions based on an area of interest for your own professional development. You are of course very welcome to watch more than one of these, but one is more than enough in order to be in line with what the ECTs will be doing in the live version of this seminar. Please take some time to do that now. You'll find that the summer session recording is approximately 50 minutes long. See you soon. Welcome back to part 3 of Year 2 Online Seminar 3. In this final section, we will predominantly be focusing on leadership and thinking about what leadership might look like for you, with opportunities to pose questions about this to the expertise of the team and think about future pledges that you wish to make to English education as individuals and as a collective cohort who've successfully completed 2 years of subject training together. In the live version of this seminar, there will be a leadership panel taking place, where ECTs can pose questions for SDLs to discuss based on a range of different leadership roles that they've had. As you are not going to be engaging in that live panel discussion, we've got an alternative reflective exercise for you to complete. But please don't worry, you won't miss out on the discussions, as we will either aim to record the session or collate some frequently asked questions and answers that we will share with all ECTs after the seminar has taken place. So let's finish the programme and talk about leadership and future pledges to subject. Let's start with a little reflection. I want you to take a moment now, perhaps pause the video for around 30 seconds, to make a list of different types of leadership opportunities that you can think of for English teachers. This may be based on your own experiences if you've been lucky enough to lead on something, or even to have a leadership role this year. Alternatively, it might be things that you have seen people leading on in your school context that have been led by others. Please pause the video now to note down a few examples. So here are some potential examples of leadership opportunities for English teachers for you to compare with your own list. Note that from this list, leadership doesn't have to mean holding a teaching and learning responsibility. There are so many ways that you can lead as a teacher that might not necessarily feel like leadership at first. I'll give you a moment to have a read of these examples on the slide, but please note that these examples are by no means an exhaustive list, and you might have some others that haven't been mentioned here. So, as outlined in the examples in the previous slide, there are many different models of leadership that exist, and that's not just in an education context, but when we're talking about any kind of organisation. And actually, the formal role and the allocated role is not what defines leadership. Cosenza's research, which is hyperlinked if you want to read it in the resources for this seminar, looks at teacher leadership themes and isolates 5 key areas. Now, the first of those areas that isn't on here is formal roles. What is clear is that a formal role, for example, being a key stage coordinator or a year leader, for example, is not definitive of teacher leadership. Actually, we need to consider the idea that effective leadership in teaching, regardless of the formality of your role, is dependent on 4 key things. The first is collaboration. Now, in this study, this focused on situations where teachers could work with their grade level or department colleagues. The participants in the study suggested that they act as leaders when they collaborate in this manner because they can make decisions that will offer learning experiences that are improved for their students. Through this type of collaboration, they also felt that they were simultaneously providing support for each other, which is a way to demonstrate teacher leadership. The second aspect is about sharing best practice. Now, although sharing best practice is also collaborative in nature, it's being reported separately from collaboration because the participants in this study were very specific about its impact on individuals and how it contributes to teacher leadership. Those who discussed sharing best practices most often pointed to opportunities where they could share their successes in the classroom with other teachers, especially teachers who may need additional support. Several participants also discussed that when teachers are successful, they can demonstrate leadership in the school by sharing their knowledge and teaching strategies with others. The third aspect is taking action. Taking action focuses in this context primarily on the notion that teachers should be the drivers of their profession, as opposed to sitting back and wanting to be directed by a principal or some other person in an admin role. And this goes right back to the beginning of this seminar when we noted the ideas of teacher agency. The participants who discussed taking action in their definition of leadership pointed to decisions having to do with curriculum choice, programme improvements, materials for instruction, student placement, anything that affects the learning outcomes of children. So in this context, it's believed that when teachers take action in making decisions in these areas, they are acting as leaders. Here, teacher leadership was found in those who took action, who had that agency at their school by advocating for change or encouraging others to support something new. So you can really start to see how these leadership threads overlap with the previous discussion that we had at the beginning of this seminar about agents of change and hosting teacher agency. Finally, we then have role modelling in the top right. In the context of this study, they discussed how role modelling can have two different forms. Some participants stated that teacher leadership was about being a role model for students, whilst others believed it was about being a role model for colleagues. There's a duality here, but both are perfectly valid. So when speaking about role modelling, most participants viewed it as an obligation to demonstrate respectful behaviours, professional dispositions, and high-quality character traits. That idea of being a role model extends to discussions about the importance of being a mentor to students. And a belief was also shared in this study that mentoring of students and leading young children by example is another way that teachers can act as leaders in a meaningful way. If you want to take a look at this in more detail and delve into some of these specific teacher comments on each aspect, you'll find them in the article linked in the seminar slides. You'll find it on slide 17. This model helps us to see that leadership, and indeed our aims for leadership in the future, don't have to be tied to a promotion or a specific formalised role in a school context. Nor does it mean that when we are leading, we are fully taking charge and control of something. Instead, it's really about how we work with others in our context on any given area of focus to improve outcomes for pupils, teaching, and/or the wider school community. Now, you might look at this and immediately be able to identify things that you already do. You may, for example, frequently collaborate and share best practice on an area of expertise in your department, which is great. If not, let's just take a moment to be able to shape some of these ideas in our school contexts and think about leadership for us as individuals in terms of what we may already do and what we would like to do. So let's go ahead and do that in the next activity now. As I mentioned earlier, when the live seminar happens, there will be a series of subject colleagues discussing and sharing experiences of leadership in different forms who have all come from the background of being English teachers or in similar subjects. As you're engaging in the contingency recording for this seminar, to support your own individual reflections, we've provided a brief overview of some key features of teacher leadership so that you can reflect on what expertise you have versus what you would like to have, and this will help feed into what leadership might look for you moving forwards. You can use the hyperlinked article here to explore the principles on this slide. We've also added a further fifth principle at the end on subject and research expertise that reflects our previous discussions about the agency that you've had in developing, critiquing and applying research-informed practice. Whilst this resource is from approximately 2016, the principles still remain. Note that these principles are quite generic depending on the leadership you want to pursue, and so you will want to think more specifically in terms of a subject or pastoral lens, for example. So, what do each of these key areas mean? Firstly, we have values and commitment. So teacher leaders are involved in their schools and influencing culture and climate. They model and uphold high standards of conduct, and they align their work with the school vision and values. These values involve promotion of diversity and inclusion, reflective of school communities, and are also keen to self-evaluate and engage in critical discussion, inquiry, and dialogue to enhance their own teaching and learning. That leads us into learning and teaching. Teacher leaders can also prioritise high-quality teaching and being responsive to learners to improve outcomes. This involves creating safe, caring and purposeful learning environments and making sure that the curriculum is well planned, using diverse and inspiring up-to-date teaching methods, but also showing flexibility and inclusivity to meet the needs of all learners, and again, reflect on the impact of this on learners across their respective department, year group, school context. The third one is about high expectations and ambition. So teacher leaders want high expectations for both students and teacher success. This means being ambitious about delivering diverse and creative teaching methods. And a good teacher leader will want a culture that celebrates pupil attainment, achievement, and leadership. This also needs to be balanced, of course, with measurable improvements and successful outcomes, but they should ultimately be accomplished practitioners who can inspire confidence in their colleagues and students in some way. The fourth strand is communication and collaboration. So teacher leaders, of course, must be able to maintain relationships with students, parents, colleagues, and external stakeholders. We would want them to value engaging in professional discussions, particularly about student learning, their development, and the development of their colleagues. They would also be able to collaborate and shape collaboration that can contribute to educational change, taking responsibility for goals of the broader team, but also giving agency for the team to enact improvements. They would also understand the importance of teacher-led development work to enhance professional knowledge. And finally, subject and research expertise. This one we've added in addition to the research paper, given the extensive work and unique selling point that you all have in this cohort of being excellent research-informed practitioners who actually know so much about the current research in reading, writing and oracy in this subject. It also, of course, means understanding the expertise of others in your team so that you can create shared resources and collaboration. Now, it's up to you how you'd like to do this activity. You might like to draw out a grid like this, and I'm going to show you a model in a moment, or you might just write down some notes in key areas and perhaps some questions you'd either like to ask someone in your school or your SDL. Whichever type you choose, it's really important that you capture some of these notes, as this will help you to think about what your next steps are as a teacher leader and agent of change, as well as supporting you to complete the final task for today's seminar afternoon a little bit later on. Even if you are in a position where you aren't choosing to stay in teaching, but are perhaps going on to a related field, these principles of leadership are really important when you're thinking about transferable skills. Consider instead how the expertise that you've developed in each of these areas could translate into leadership in a new role and a new context that you would like to develop. So, to support you with this, let's have a quick look at an example reflection. So, here's an example of one that I have filled out, considering where I was before I became a formal Key Stage 4 coordinator in English when I was in my third year of teaching. So on the left are the things that I had done, And the right are the things that I felt I needed to do in order to develop my leadership skills. I've also then summarised this into a reflection on the right-hand side. My goal is to lead a key stage or some department planning. I think I have some good examples of sharing with my department, and I am good at making new resources. I think I need to do some more work in understanding how data is used in my school, as lots of this has been done for me. I also want to start speaking to some post holders to find more about their day-to-day and how they keep on top of things for their key stage and what teachers are teaching. I also think it's useful for me to know more about Key Stage 5 so I can see what that pathway looks like. So feel free to use this as a model for making notes. Also feel free to do it in your own way. Remember, this is not about being specific to a TLR or a formal post. It's more generally about developing your leadership skills in your department or in your year team, for example. Please pause the video now and take some time to reflect on what experiences you already have in terms of leadership and what you would like to develop to help you identify the next steps like I've done on the screen. You should probably spend around 10 minutes on this activity, and you may wish to revisit some of the previous 2 slides in exploring what each of these areas mean. Any other questions or things you want to share, please do reach out to your SDL, as I know that they would really enjoy reading and responding to these leadership reflections. Thank you for taking the time to engage in that reflection activity about leadership experiences. Regardless of your future plans and what you are interested in potentially leading, there are some career-long subject habits that we can all employ as subject practitioners to support our next steps as teachers and agents of change. One of the best pieces of advice at this stage in your career is to lead by example. It's important that our own practice is as robust as it can be so that we can inspire and lead appropriately. And in order for that to be the case, it's important to have some of these career-long subject habits in place. So, first of all, leading into support networks. We may find that there are some barriers to this in terms of workload management in moving into the next stage of our career, and we might not know the best approaches to teaching writing, supporting colleagues with a new talk strategy, for example. This is where we have to remember the expertise of those around us. Many of your colleagues may have taken on leadership responsibility. They might have studied leadership in the form of an NPQ, which you might like to do. They will know how to support you and which strategies worked well for them. So make sure that you reach out and ask about. Next, using the ambassador community. Your PDLs will have information about your ambassador offer this year and opportunities for you to engage with this as part of the ongoing Teach First movement. You also have access to your SDL for the rest of this academic year, but once you become an ECT2, think about how you might engage with the ambassador community and the networks that you've made on your training days, for example, to find really experienced colleagues who can share your journey for networking and resources or initiatives. Next, prioritise robust subject knowledge. There's such power in being a passionate English teacher, and we really hope that we've championed subject knowledge on the programme as a means of developing and making sure that it's always a priority. Try and take this habit with you in the next stage of your career, as it will be inspiring to those you lead and teach, and will make sure that you continue to enjoy teaching and leading so much more. The best English departments truly are those who collaborate and work on subject knowledge together, and I know that there is some fantastic practice that goes on amongst you. Next, observing experts. Linking to that first point about support networks, this can actually come both in and outside the classroom. Continue your practice of observing those who teach well. Everything our team do well in our delivery, or we have done in teaching, has come in some way from observation and shared practice of one another. Continue to magpie and adapt and welcome new teachers into your classroom. See if you can observe some moderation meetings, middle leadership, senior leadership, or discuss good leadership practice with those around you who have secured those positions. Next, keeping up with research. As we've mentioned today, Teach First pride ourselves in our research-based approach, and for some of you who have discussed any interviews that you may have had for roles, you'll know that we have highlighted this to you as one of your candidate strengths. The links we will share at the end will help to explore new developments in thinking about English. but consider about your approach to teaching and what you might have learnt or how you might join in a healthy debate about English practice. Remember that you are experts now. And lastly, continuous reflection. The best way to improve is to reflect continuously. How might I change for the better? What have I done well? If you remember Brookfield's lenses, think about reflecting through different lenses to get a holistic picture of how you're doing. If we circle back to this earlier thinking on change agents, reflection isn't just about whether a pedagogy worked or didn't work in your classroom. It's about what you're doing for your pupils, your community, and whether you are really tailoring their learning experiences to the needs within and beyond the classroom, as well as thinking about some of those assumptions that you might make about pupils in that context as well. At the bottom, I just wanted to also remind you of the habits to develop subject knowledge. You've seen these before, but these add to our thinking here. All of the strategies certainly complement this approach, but give you some robust steps to revisit should you ever feel that you need them. And so, throughout this recording, we've considered how you have been shaped into agents of change, the ways you hold agency as a teacher, and what this might look like in future leadership. Already, these are things that you wouldn't be able to fathom when you first started the programme, and yet this is just the tip of the iceberg that has been your 2 years of development on the programme. With this in mind, we want to take this last section of the recording for you to be able to celebrate your achievements and think about your next steps as English teachers who have successfully completed the Teach First training programme. Now, you may remember at the final training day that you had last year in April, we asked you to contribute what you can do now that you couldn't do a year ago in teaching. This is what you and your peers shared. And if you look at this a year on, you may even find these to be a distant memory as skills that you take for granted because they're second nature now. Carol Dweck, who does a lot of work on growth mindset, recognises in her research that when we praise and celebrate our effort and choices we make, when the doing gets challenging, we are more inclined to want to succeed and progress in our goals. She called this a growth mindset, and this is one I know that lots of you are working hard to develop in your pupils. As such, celebration is appreciating your efforts and the choices you've made. So, let's take this growth mindset thinking along with a very familiar model of reflection to celebrate your effort of these last 2 years on the programme and your subject-specific development. So you may recognise these 4 lenses from Brookfield's model of reflection. And let's start with the top left and think about you, the self lens. As a learner and developing teacher, how do you feel about your effort and hard work over the 2 years? Take a moment now to jot down what you are most proud of persevering with in your English teaching and why. Please pause the video to do that before we move on to the next lens. Now let's think about the student lens. We know our students are the reason we do this job. They stretch us to think hard about how to support their learning. So, take another minute now to note down, when did your students really challenge you to think hard about your English teaching, and why was this? Pause the video to take another minute to add some notes to this lens. Colleague lens is our next one. Now, you've had lots of support roles around you over the last 2 years, mentor, PDL, SDL, and each other. So, with that in mind, take a further minute to consider, what feedback have you really engaged with that has pushed you to develop further as an English teacher? Pause the video again to take a moment to add some notes to this reflection lens of colleagues. And finally, literature. You have all engaged deeply with your module assignments in English that we know have had an impact for your pupils and your teaching. The final question is, Which piece of research or pedagogy have you embraced in order to really develop your English practice? Take another moment to pause the video and to complete this final reflection. And once you have these notes, we can move into sharing some final subject pledges. Now, on your very first subject day in Institute for our Subject Seminar 1, you may or may not remember your very first breakout task that we asked you to discuss with your new English colleagues. And here it was. What brings you to teach English with Teach First? And what do you want to be like as an English teacher? Firstly, just even looking at this question, I wonder if you remember what you said. If you do, you may wish to note this down alongside your reflections that you've just written and consider, has your position changed? How do you see English teaching now compared to 2 years ago? And if there has been a change, why? Let's think about how this links to our final pledge. And this is certainly something that we really want you to capture and to email to your SDL if you are doing the contingency version. We'll also share the highlights of the whole cohort with everyone from the live seminar as part of the follow-up resources. So let's finish the final seminar by reflecting on 2 questions. Firstly, why is English such an important subject? And secondly, what is one pledge that you would like to make to the subject of English as you move into your second ECT year and graduate from this programme? You've got some examples of what the pledges might link to at the bottom of the screen. It might be a pledge related to the teaching of English, to your students of English, to leading English, thinking about our previous activities, or to a significant contribution you want to make to the English education community. Please pause the video and spend around 5 minutes capturing your answers to these questions now. You may even wish to open up an email and pop them straight to your SDL, as they would love to see it. Please take the time to do that now. Thank you so much for engaging in that final reflection activity. I hope that by thinking about the questions from Institute all the way through to the current place you're in now, that you've had a chance to really think about the progress you've made and the journey you've been on as English teachers. Finally, we just wanted to remind you that there are a wealth of networks for English teachers available. Now, this list is not exhaustive in any way, but are perhaps what we would consider to be the most popular go-tos in recent years. Particularly on there, you have the English Network, which offer professional development, support and guidance to English teachers via a podcast and also through their X feed. English in Practice is formed by English specialists who are passionate about bringing research to English teachers around the country. They take pedagogical research and translate it into practical strategies that you can use in your classroom through virtual events. If you want to get involved, you can follow them on social media platforms. Finally, there are a few other key voices in social media and online in relation to English teaching. But of course, you may also have other networks that you engage with, and we'd really welcome you sharing those with your peers when you have the opportunity to. And with that in mind, it only remains to say on behalf of all of the English subject development leads here at Teach First, well done, and a huge thank you for your energies, your enthusiasm, and your absolute commitment to tackling educational inequality by completing these 2 years of the programme and making our delivery days just an absolute joy. You've all been so resilient and engaged in the aspirational English curriculum that we've immersed you in, and we really hope you see the benefits and that you've been able to achieve at least some of that vision of being an English teacher that you came into Institute with. As noted by Yeats, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. And by completing these 2 years in our partner schools, you have undoubtedly done that for so many young people, and also as your support roles for us in your innovative thinking and collaboration. The very best of luck with your future endeavours, and we look forward to seeing you and crossing paths again one day soon. Take care.